Get your paychecks up to 2 days faster with Early Pay. True story. Welcome to Huntington.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Week That Was. My name is Saeed Khan, and it is our first post-Memorial Day podcast session, so that means that you can wear white. You can do so for another few months until we have to go back to post-Newport social modalities, whatever the hell that means. We are joined with some really exciting, but not iconic, according to Nancy, people. We have, of course, 9:10 a.m. radio host Adolph Mongo. We have Darcy McDonald, former Free Press reporter and PR specialist. We have newly minted 2022 Michiganian of the Year and Neiman Fellow at Harvard University's School of Journalism, Danny Fenster. We have Deadline Detroit's Nancy Derringer, and also from Deadline Detroit, we have, of course, Alan Lengel. And it seems like everybody's at home, or meaning they're not traveling.
More or less, yeah.
More or less, excellent. Well, we don't have to travel anymore because we have social media, and it seems as though the Supreme Court of the United States has weighed in on an issue regarding this. Just this week, SCOTUS has blocked, at least temporarily, a Texas law which was restricting social media platforms. Ostensibly, the legislature in Texas put this out because of what they felt was the undue and unnecessary and unjustifiable blocking of conservative voices from social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, etc. In a 5-4 margin with some really interesting quote-unquote alliances, the Supreme Court has put that to rest momentarily, and it seems as though it's allowing for the case to then still percolate a little bit more. What are we to make of both the substance of this kind of a lawsuit, the law itself, and also I think what's interesting is which justices voted for and against the block?
I think it's interesting. I think we're still evolving in terms of what social media is and who has access to it. And I think for so long people are thinking like Twitter, Facebook, it is a public forum, but it's still a privately held business. Just like Deadline Detroit, I mean, anyone can't just say, I'm gonna, we can eliminate comments on our page. We ban people sometimes for racist, quotes or whatever, comments. Comments, thank you. That's it. But I think, the fact that they're trying to force social media to take everyone, I think social media in times like Twitter sometimes should be a little looser, but at the same time, they're not being that hard on Trump. I mean, if we did half the shit that, we posted half the shit that guy has posted, we would have been banned for as well. And so I think there's a misconception about all that.
Well, and I think it's interesting too that, when the social media companies say, no, we want less freedom. I think that's a pretty interesting moment in time. And if you look at the shootings that we've had recently, at least 2 of the shooters involved, had done stuff online, hate-filled stuff online. So I think they need some discretion to be able to monitor and weed out some bad actors. And frankly, they haven't done a good job for a long time. So, I'm glad, at least for this temporary stay. I don't know how it's going to play out ultimately.
Would it make a difference? Would it make a difference? Because you got some of these people, even before the social media, you had hate crimes, you had people lynching Black folks for over 100 years. So to ban for them to say, okay, we want you not to ban people from getting on and saying crazy shit, will it make a difference anyway? Because you're going to have those folks out there that's going to do what they're going to do anyway. If they're going to shoot you up, they're going to shoot you up.
Well, Adolph, you're on 9:10 a.m. and you're regulated by the FCC. Is there going to be then the prospect of a kind of a regulatory body from the government that's going to then be handling social media, or is it really then left up to legislatures to go ahead and do that?
Where the way it's happening, whoever's in power controls the airways, the books, or whatever. We see this push in this country of censorship, even though the Republicans saying we don't want the government in our business, but yet they want to ban abortions, they want to ban books, they want to ban any and everything that they don't agree with. So here it is.
The argument in favor of regulating social media essentially is the same one. They're calling them what they call them, common carriers. Isn't that the legal argument, that they're the same as the telephone company? I mean, the telephone company can't come to you and say, we're taking your phone out because we don't like you. But when I signed up in the olden days before the internet, you didn't have a choice in phone companies. You went with the Bell system, or if you were unlucky and lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, you were at GTE. But the point was that, I mean, the airwaves are regulated because the airwaves belong to the people. They belong to all of us. And so, that's what we've set up. The idea that Twitter is somehow the same as a monopolistic phone company is ludicrous. You talk about the social media platforms that these guys have made their threats on. Often they're platforms I've never even heard of or wouldn't know how to find. There's one called Discord. There's one, I think the guy that shot up Buffalo was live streaming on Twitch, which I believe is a network for people who play video games live and the people who watch that shit. So I mean, this is all about carrying water for Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump started his own social media company, he's got Truth Social now. If you want to hear from Donald Trump, where to log in if they still are alive.
Well, if there's one called Twitch, then I think we should make one called Facial Tick. I think that's next. Danny, you've been on a different dimension of this, with seeing how governments regulate speech very heavily. Right. And even today, you see countries that are leveraging their power and their authority to push back on social media companies elsewhere. Particularly, you see that in China. Where do you see the trajectory here in the United States now?
Well, I don't know about the trajectory in terms of, how it'll all play out with our domestic politics. I could only say, it does seem to me that, as a legal question, these are private companies, and so they're allowed to create user policies and then enforce along those lines. As a more general sort of philosophical thing, I tend to be kind of a free speech absolutist. So I think when you start regulating what people are allowed to say where, it's, obviously a very tricky thing. And I would tend to be a little more liberal on those things. That comes with a lot of danger, though, obviously. We know, when you allow people to say whatever they want, the line between sort of incitement or organizing for violence or carrying out violence, and the line, of just expressing an opinion or advocating. It's tricky. They're really, really difficult things. And I don't think our country in my lifetime has been this close to, has seen that line as blurry as it is now. I think especially in the wake of January 6th, which I watched from Myanmar a month before it actually was successfully carried out in that country. So yeah, no, I don't have clear answers because I think it's a really difficult.
What were you thinking when you were watching that in Myanmar?
It was terrifying and embarrassing, and because people were using the word coup, and this is a word that Americans associate with other countries, but it still didn't. It wasn't successful, obviously, in the United States. And I kind of expected the sort of norms and the judicial process that followed to sort of maybe sort things out and right it a little bit. Just slowly been happening to some extent, maybe, arguably. And then a month later it happened there in a very different context. It was the military. It wasn't a bunch of civilians organizing on social media.
Is there an irony out there that the very people who tend to be against net neutrality are now, it seems, really preaching for it?
Oh yeah, exactly. And these are the same people who very selectively preach states' rights. Unless it's abortion, then they want it national.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it's an old story that Republicans do not walk their own talk. I mean, there's particularly in the state houses. I mean, Washtenaw County or the city of Ann Arbor wants to ban single-use plastic grocery bags, because they pollute, they get into, they can't be recycled, et cetera, et cetera. So what does Meyer do? They call up their friends in the state legislature, and the state legislature passes a ban on bans of single-use grocery bags. That's just one example of this. And I tend to believe, I'm kind of like I'm a little bit like Danny in that I kind of believe that there's a place in this gigantic country for almost everybody. If you want to live in a progressive place where nobody's gonna give you the stink face because you let weeds grow on your lawn, well, there's Ann Arbor. It's full of people like that. If you want to live in a place where you're definitely gonna get that, then live in some suburb like Grosse Pointe. I mean, there's a place for everyone, but they don't want to allow that kind of thing to happen if it pisses off their donors. So
I wanted you to break out into song from West Side Story there, Nancy. There's a place for us, but what?
No, that's not even close. Go ahead.
One time I was in London and I went into a store there, and they didn't have. Not only did they not have bags for purchase, they had no bags, and I didn't realize that. And so I actually carried out my groceries, got on the tube for about 10 stops, and somebody offered a bag, and I said, "No, look away, I'm hideous."
It's actually pretty common in Europe. That's why people carry those string bags that crush down to the size of a golf ball, but expand for whatever.
There was a great sketch on Portlandia that played.
I like the one where you could look at the chicken dossier before you ate. So what about this issue about Republican and Democrat? I mean, we saw when it came to this restraining order or this block at the Supreme Court, first of all, it was 5-4, and I thought that was a little bit too close for comfort. It seemed as though it would be more obvious that the justices would align more with allowing a private company to do what it is. But the fact that I think Elena Kagan sided with the dissent, Roberts and Kavanaugh and Coney Barrett sided with the majority to block this, means that people like Nina Totenberg and the others who spend their lives and careers watching the Supreme Court can't really predict it as well as they thought.
Yeah.
I
what do
mean,
you think,
Kagan did not explain why she dissented, and she didn't.
Yeah.
She didn't go along with the other group, which is Alito, Clarence Thomas. I mean, it's so predictable. Whatever the most fascist view they can get, they support. I mean, the law down there in Texas, apparently you could sue these social media companies if they block somebody. I mean, it's just insanity. I mean, it's like the Taliban is like just seeping in the whole mentality of restrictive, religious, impositions. It's just, I don't know.
I saw a meme the other day of Alito and Thomas as Chang and Eng Bunker, the original conjoined twins,
The Siamese
which was great. But I mean, does that mean that it's reflective of a country where these labels aren't really sticky as much as they used to be? I'm having a lot of trouble making sense with really who's on what base now.
Are you talking about the way the vote lined up?
Yeah.
Nah, I don't.
Well,
I really don't. I mean, I think this is a one-off. I'd be interested in hearing Elena Kagan's argument, but not very. So.
All right, Danny, you wanted to come in?
No, yeah. I mean, I think the court still seems pretty partisan and pretty split. It's kind of a weird anomaly. It seems like. I thought that was really interesting that Kagan offered no explanation or anything. Definitely would be interested in hearing her elaborate on that.
Puzzling.
Well, I think by the end of the month, we're going to go back to the comfort of predictability when some of these big cases come down, and then we'll see where they are. Adolf.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see any surprises like you have in the past, because when Eisenhower was asked what was his two biggest mistakes as president, he said they sit on the Supreme Court, because he thought he was putting conservatives, especially Earl Warren, who signed the order to intern the Japanese during World War II. And they turned out to be liberal. In the case of Kennedy appointing the former Detroit Lion Wizard White, who turned out to be more conservative than that liberal label he had. You won't see that. You see Clarence Thomas and his twin brother and the little idiots that Trump appointed to the court, who lied when they say they can be fair, etc. We'll see
about
when
abortion.
Yes.
Lied about abortion.
No,
Yes.
a lot of that. I mean, that all starts with like the nomination and confirmation. Also, I mean, I think it used to be a given. The confirmation hearings were kind of a given. If somebody had been nominated, there was some understanding that, whatever our specific policy or partisan allegiances are, we are picking a professional judge who, sticks to sort of whatever our agreed interpretations, our agreed respect for the Constitution is. And all of that is like, I mean, we're all reading the same document differently. We're all watching the same stories and interpreting them differently. And I mean, even beginning with the nomination now, it's already, sides are all staked out and everything.
Right. It's true. I mean, it was pretty standard even up into the Clinton era that justices were confirmed by, 95-5, maybe, with 5 lunatics, throwing in. So, and the idea, I mean, what Adolph's talking about, that was what they taught us in American government class, that these people can be loose cannons. But I think that era is absolutely over.
I blame Joe Biden for Clarence Thomas. The way they did Anita Hill, the Democrats beat her up so bad that they should have seen through this guy.
Right.
And they voted to confirm him anyway. So this is what we got. Thank you, Joe Biden.
People say it was a different era. I mean, I think I was too young to really remember that, but I mean, to me, and I think to people my age, especially living through sort of the gender arguments and Me Too that we've lived through, like, it seems shocking to learn about how that confirmation hearing played out. It's hard to imagine myself back into that because it's not that long ago.
Well, 35 years ago was the Bork hearings, and it seems as though things really got started then. And I mean, here was a person who I think a lot of Americans might disagree with his outcome, but his methodology, his scholarship was really impeccable. And maybe it is because of the Bork hearings that having a record, having any kind of scholarship is regarded as radioactive. And so therefore we find particularly the Trump nominees combined probably had less of a publishing output than a fortune cookie publisher. So we do have that. Now we do have some news that's more local, and that was occurring up at the Mackinac Policy Conference. The home of Somewhere in Time, for those of you who are fond of that movie. Oh, come on, Nancy, it's a guilty pleasure.
Not for me. Go ahead.
But it seems like Mayor Mike Duggan might have let slip the identity of an FBI informant in an investigation regarding towing contractors and contracts with the city, particularly involving Janae Ayers and Andre Spivey. Was it a slip up? Was it something that he's allowed to do? How does this then affect confidence in investigations, and how does it affect confidence in the mayor? Darcy.
Well, first, I forgot my song from at the top of the show. I don't know if anybody likes Run DMC, but it's McConnell, not McDonald. So.
Oh.
And it's Spivey.
It's Spivey. Yes, Spivey. So, but I think, first of all, I don't understand why Spivey is confiding in the mayor about this. I mean, that to me, that's like, the most harrowing thing you would face as an elected official, to be the subject of that. I just think that's really odd that, one of his first calls is to the mayor. And then obviously the mayor, by sharing that, certainly impeded things and put somebody at jeopardy. I don't know if he, what was your word, Saeed, slipped up. It's clear that, he just didn't use any caution. So I think it was terrible. If you're more conspiratorial, then you say he's giving the heads up to other people who might have been complicit. I'm less conspiratorial, so I won't go that far.
Well, Adolf, how about you? I mean, you can certainly use something more strongly than slip up.
He told everybody. He told the whole 11th floor. He told everyone. He probably told the people that was being investigated. There's no excuse. He's a former prosecutor. He should have known better. When Spivey came to him, he should have said, "I don't want to hear. Don't tell me anything." But yet, he's a hell of a political operator. So he got that information and he passed it on to his deputy, his legal counsel, and everybody knew about it. When you work for a mayor, and I work for a mayor, one person tell you one thing, it's no secret. Everybody knows. Sure. So that was, what would have happened if somebody would have hurt the informant and he would wound up dead somewhere? But would the mayor be held responsible for spreading that around? You can't say, "Oh, my mistake. Oh, my bad. I didn't know he was the focus." Duggan know that they was on him. He got moles everywhere. The feds and City Hall, 13th floor, and other people's offices. So he has an idea of what's happening in the city. So no excuse.
It's like on Seinfeld. He's got moles so big they've got their own moles. Alan.
Look, I mean, first of all, the information in those political circles, and you guys know more, is golden. I mean, for the mayor to be able to, dole that information out to his allies, which basically Spivey was an ally, Ayers was an ally. He's trying to keep them from getting in trouble. Is it improper? You would think, as Adolf says, he's the prosecutor, but I don't believe there's anything illegal about it. There's nothing that binds him. He's not the target. He's not cooperating. Look, Spivey was cooperating and went around telling people who the informant was, and he did not get in. There was no obstruction charges there. They basically just said, "Screw you. Your cooperation means nothing. You're sabotaging our investigation." So the mayor denies that he knew that. I'm skeptical of that. I mean, the story by Robert Snell is so well sourced. Multiple, like 4 sources say this. It's pretty hard to believe that the mayor didn't have any inkling of it. And like I say, Spivey, who's an ally of the mayor's, he told them, look, this guy's an informant. It was a person in the towing industry who was working with the FBI, and look, that person, Spivey, realized he had introduced that guy to different people, and the word was like, "Hey, stay away from that guy. That guy's gonna, get you indicted."
So Nancy and Danny, I mean, let's say this wasn't said in a public forum, but you guys were interviewing the mayor one-on-one, and he let slip the name of the FBI informant.
To me?
Do you?
What? Are you kidding?
I mean, sometimes I like to play make believe. All right. And let's say that, I mean, you have the name. Do you report it? Do you hold it? I mean, how do you operate on something like that?
I'm a feature writer. I passed this one to Danny.
Yeah, well, I was mostly kind of a feature writer too, and now I'm known for being this political,
prisoner.
Yeah. But I mean, I think you do a lot of due diligence. If you think reporting that is going to put someone's life in danger, you have to do a lot of reporting around the reporting to figure out what the risks are. But I mean, I don't know. Is the conversation on the record?
You call the feds. You call the feds. You call. Yeah.
Right.
I
You
have an
start doing
interesting
some fact
story.
checking, and you start asking if
Yeah.
publishing that is going to cause damage.
I
You
have
call
an
the head
interesting
of the
story.
FBI and say we heard that this guy is your informant in City
Well,
Hall
yeah,
going
you probably
around.
I mean,
you talk to your editor, and your editor would talk to the attorney, and then
Yeah.
yeah, I
there's
mean
so many layers.
that seems fairly ridiculous. Is this guy a confidential informant? I'd like to publish his name. Go
Well, I
ahead,
mean, I
Brenda.
think if you call and you say, "Look, we've got this name and we want to run with this story," they're gonna say, you know, I haven't been in the situation, but they're gonna say, "Look, please
you
hold
do
that.
that.
'Cause you could be endangering somebody's life," or they'll say, like, "We don't know who that guy is. Go for it. You'll look foolish." Al would know this very well.
Yeah. Alan.
I have actually a real story involving this. It was back in the early 90s when I was at the Detroit News. I called a FBI source of mine and said, "Hey, I heard there's a sting going on, an FBI sting going on with drugs and money." And the guy's like, and the guy usually knew what was going on. He goes, "Nah," he goes, "Nah," he goes, "I haven't heard that." And I said, "Well, do me a favor. If you heard something, let me know." So I find out that he slams down the phone and he's so pissed. And then an hour later, he calls me and says, "Hey, meet me in the lobby of the Detroit News." He comes over, takes me over to FBI headquarters there. I sit down with the second in charge and he goes, "Look," the second in charge says, "We've got one more dope shipment, a fake dope shipment coming in with undercover agents. And if you report this, maybe somebody's going to get killed. You're going to screw this up for us. Can you hold off till we get the next shipment?" And I said, "Well, let me talk to my editor." And we agreed to hold off and, to do that, to not sabotage their investigation. Now, it's something we talked about and we felt like we shouldn't put it out there. So there are circumstances there, and you have to balance that, how important it is to get that name out. And look, I mean, if you had found out during the investigation that this person is working undercover with the FBI, I would be hesitant as a reporter to put that out there, and if they're, and interfere with their investigation. But I don't know.
And in my experience, just being in newsrooms, that would be the determination of, I would say, 99 out of 100 senior editors that I worked with. They just don't want to be. I mean, at heart, they're trying to get information out. They love to get a good story out, but if the worst case scenario came to pass, the shitstorm that would come down on a media source or a media outlet that did that would be so intense that it would not be worth it.
Well, don't forget the Prince of Darkness and Valerie, was a CIA agent. So
yeah, right.
We have at least one example.
Right.
No back.
Well, Danny, don't sell yourself short for being a features reporter. I mean, I think Woodstein were working the Metro section of the Washington Post when they unearthed
the third-rate burglary.
Although they were hard news reporters.
Yeah, they were news guys.
In Metro.
I don't know. You must have watched the director's cut of All the President's Men, Alan. I mean, because I just watched the PG version. So
Can I give a great little story of Woodward and Bernstein? This was I was at a going away party at the Post, and the guy was sitting next to Bob Woodward during Watergate, and it was a Monday, and Carl Bernstein was dating Nora Ephron in New York, and it was Monday in the thick of Watergate. And Carl Bernstein shows up on Monday at about 2 p.m. And Bob Woodward looks up and says, "Where the hell you been?" And he says, "Oh, the Eastern flight, Eastern airline flights, the shuttles were all backed up and delayed." And Carl Bernstein walks away, and Woodward gets on the phone and is like, "Hello, Eastern Airlines. Were there any delays?" No delays? Okay, thank you.
That's awesome. That should have been a book right there on Bernstein. So another issue regarding the FBI, Clinton-era lawyer Michael Sussman was acquitted in his trial involving the indictment on lying to the FBI. The prosecutor was a Trump-era prosecutor who seemed to have a very ahabic relationship with bringing this guy down. Serving as a Jenga piece to the entire edifice of Hillary Clinton, her campaign, and of course the alleged involvement of Russia with its complicity with the Trump campaign, something which the Mueller report had already affirmed. Is this a good hit on the Trump narrative about the Clinton campaign being involved in calumny?
I think, it's interesting, people. I mean, look, they have worked on this case for 3 years, and this is all they get, and they don't get a conviction. I mean, it doesn't look great. One of the jurors was quoted afterwards as basically saying, "What's the big deal? There's bigger things out there than this." I, I don't know. Did the guy lie? He may have been a little deceptive. Not that the Clintons would ever be deceptive, but I don't know.
I think that juror clearly had more attention on the Depp Heard trial, so maybe a little bit of information bias there.
Right.
But I mean, right now, all of these things add up. I mean, they are ones that then fuel talk radio. I mean, we're talking about it, and then serve as a way to either confirm biases on one hand or to refute prejudices on the other. I mean, Danny, I see you nodding your head. I mean, how do you see a case like this then playing out? Or is it just simply too esoteric for the general American consumer?
For the general public, probably too esoteric, probably not that important. I think it'll come and go. But when these cases are, brought to court and publicly adjudicated, it is just fuel for conspiracy theorists. I mean, they're learning new information from the case that they're going to just plug right into everything they've already believed. I think generally this thing is just going to come and go. It's not that big of a deal. So he offered information. I mean, I've only vaguely know, but he offered information to the FBI. He shared a tip, but didn't say he was working for the Clinton campaign. Fairly certainly, they knew he was working for the Clinton campaign, so it probably didn't affect their investigation very much. It doesn't seem like a huge deal, but I imagine it could provide a lot of fuel for Pizzagate, QAnon, whatever.
Darcy, is this just going to be then a move on to the Hunter Biden hard drive?
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, look, we know that 9 times out of 10 people stake out their positions and they're going to believe what they want to believe. So people who already had formed their ideas about all the parties involved prior to this happening. So, but I do think the average Joe is not focused on this, but people who are rabid about these theories probably are.
The average Nance was definitely not focused on it, because when it actually happened, when the verdict came down, I had to read up on this case because I wasn't even aware it was going on. But it was it would involve the Russia Gate investigation. I know that in Trump land, it is an article of faith that the Russian interference in 2016 absolutely did not happen. It's a figment of the progressive left's imagination. It didn't happen at all, even though there is abundant evidence that the Russians were in that campaign, not in the campaign, but they were rat fucking as people, one guy put it, they didn't hack the election, they hacked the electorate. Okay, they were rat fucking individual, voters and so forth. I mean, Paul Manafort was sharing their polling data with his sources in Russia. So the idea that they absolutely had nothing to do with 2016 is ridiculous. But you'll never, ever, ever convince a red hat of that.
And talk about checks and balances. I mean, here's the Mueller investigation investigating the president. The president is putting out the word to all his stooges and saying, "Don't cooperate. We'll take care of you."
Then he takes care of them.
And he takes care of them. He pardons them. And so, I mean, where are the checks and balances? You talk about corruption, and then people say, well, these people wouldn't cooperate. They lied. They went to prison, someone for lying. And they're saying, well, there's no evidence of it's.
Right, exactly.
Well, I mean, the Steele dossier is in the alt-right world up there with, as far as a central piece, like the gold plates are in Utah with the Mormon Church. I mean, it is just simply all that they are talking about. By the way, Nancy, rodential intercourse. We're going to have to unpack that.
We always have an E rating on this show. So I always like to just break the ice with the first big F-bomb. But I want to pee leave. That's I wanted that bumper sticker for my car at some point. I want to pee leave. I believe the P tape exists. I believe I'm gonna see it before I die.
The rat phrase is like a gerrymandering thing, right? That
rat fucking came. It's the first time I ever heard rat fucking was All the President's Men. We were talking about All the President's Men. It was Donald Segretti talked about it. And he said it was the little dirty tricks you did on the campaign trail to fuck with your opponent. And I think one of them was they would put their shoes out outside their hotel room to have them, polished overnight. I guess that's something that hotels used to offer. And you just went down at 2:00 in the morning and stole. So these guys would have to appear for their next campaign appearance in sneakers or flip flops or whatever. So
someone once told me in Alpharetta, Georgia, that if you see a pineapple in somebody's front porch, that means that house is a swinger house. So I get it with the shoes.
Wow.
Yeah. Alan.
I was going to say about the Steele report. I mean, it's interesting. It's been trash, and I speak with some subjectivity because Glenn Simpson, who is one of the authors of that, is a close friend. But people talk about it being totally disproved, but nobody has disproved the P tape. There's a lot in there, and it was provided with a caveat that some of this stuff is rumors, which in the intelligence world, it wasn't presented to the FBI and to Congress as the emes, as they say in Yiddish, the total truth. It was with caveats there, and some of the stuff has just not been confirmed, but it's not been disproven. And we see so often in really the mainstream media that the Steele report, they're trying to bend over backwards to be fair, and they're calling it totally disproved, and it hasn't been all disproved, and it's all bullshit. I think.
New Yiddish word alert, by the way. I got that one.
Emes, the emes. That was the Woody Allen. Woody Allen used that in some of the movies.
So I got to ask: is there something subliminal then with MSNBC? I mean, because that could be seriously genius. So just saying as a sort of quasi Gentile here.
Let's add to the conspiracy theories around Bill Gates with that one. So yeah, MS is a secret Jew.
CNN has now put out a memo saying they're not going to do as many news flashes. They've been using it too loosely. I don't know if you read that, but just
you mean every hour beginning with breaking news?
Right, breaking news: the president has landed at the White House.
I don't know how I can live a life without redlining my car. I mean, the pedal is always down to the metal. Well, invoking my best Shakespeare, now is the summer of our discontent. It seems as though 70% of Michiganders polled say the country is going in the wrong direction. Of course, with many of these polls, it seems as though they don't really parse it well enough to say that it's quite possible that on either side of the political divide, people might have dissatisfaction based on whatever is important to them. Conservatives may feel as though this country is 70 years past where it really needs to be. And the other side of the political aisle might feel, well, maybe the reason the country is in a hell in a handbasket is because of the other side wanting the country to go back 70 years. How do you think this is going to play out both culturally and politically with the midterms coming up and then in 2024? Are things really that bad?
That bad when you got people like Herschel Walker can become a U.S. senator. But we saw Tommy Tuberville, a football coach. He's a senator. They got all these Looney Tunes. They got elected. When I was growing up, those folks, you knew who they were, but they didn't get elected to office. Now they taking over school boards, state houses, being governor, and they just doing any and everything. And you talk to Herschel Walker, man, he probably played football without a helmet because he's brain damaged. The guy, and he's dangerous. You think what her name? Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Marjorie Taylor Greene, all right.
That bitch is crazy, but Herschel Walker is out of his fucking mind. There's no question about it. And he's supposed to be. Here he is. He's gonna be a U.S. senator if he wins. And what is he gonna do? Go right there. He fits right in with the Republican Party. It's a party of what? Nuts, crazies, anybody that take us back 70 years. They want to go back 170 years. They want, if they could put legalized slavery on the ballot, they would. There's no question that some of these people and what they say and what they do, they're doing it. Banning books. Listen, Adolf Hitler would have been right at home here with some of these people. Yeah, Stalin. You name some of the worst people ever lived. They'll feel right at home in some of these cities and these towns in this good old USA.
So, in other words, I think that we've seen now that the 70% could apply to pretty much anybody. I mean, the Republicans are screaming about Joe Biden, the inflation, the gas prices, all this stuff, but they won't do anything about it. I mean, the Republicans in Congress will block every effort to ease the pain for people. I think they want the misery to continue through November. I mean, it seems to be taken as an article of faith that it's going to be a bloodbath in nationwide. Whether that happens in Michigan remains to be seen. However,
it seems. Go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say the in terms of it being that bad or whether it's not. I think it's just a constant crisis. If we had COVID, we're still recovering from that in more ways than one. The war in Ukraine. I mean, you can't help but feel overwhelmed. And now you are literally living in at the pump or at the grocery store. So it's that creates a whole domino effect of people feeling being impacted personally one way or another. And so I think that is a contributing factor in terms of the high numbers. We'll see. I think you're right, Nancy. I'm not sure that Michigan will play out well, especially in Michigan, because it as to Adolph's point, it really is crazy town on the GOP side for the tickets. So I think the outcomes may be markedly different here, but
I don't know. We thought Donald Trump was a joke, but he was the real thing. And listen, anytime you can get people like Jesse Ventura elected governors of state, Arnold Schwarzenegger, they the governor. Anybody can run and get elected because people are just tired of the same old politicians on both sides of the fence. So Republicans have an agenda. They're carrying it out. Those folks who we looked at as nuts, they're now firmly in control of that party. And they are electing folks. And just like in Michigan, they're building up an army of election challengers. And their goal is to go into Detroit and disrupt the election. They're going to have some issues because some of these people they're not going to let them come in their face and say, let me see your ID and all this other stuff. So I hope the city is prepared to deal with some violence, because I can see some violent things happening.
Yeah. I can say I had a little video here. I wanted just the irrational stuff that's going on during this campaign year, and I just want to play this.
Ingram of Fox News would have us.
Whoops.
Ingram of Fox News would have us believe that marijuana is to blame.
Respective medical studies for years now have demonstrated that pot use, especially among teens, can trigger psychosis and increase the chance that a young person will develop violent behaviors.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe we should make sure that those young people don't have AR-15s in their house.
I've never met anybody who blazed up, who had the motor skills to go ahead and load an AR-15 I mean, they could barely go ahead and get the nachos out of the bag.
I was just going to
Well-
say the only thing in danger when I was a stoned teenager was my mother's Oreo stash, and that was about it. You know, it was.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel made a little joke later and said, "Yeah, we remember the Willie Nelson massacre in 1985."
Might as well,
Yeah.
might as well resurrect Reefer Madness again. Then
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
this is
This is going on. People are being fed this all the time, and we don't, and we can't figure out why people are thinking the way they do. But if you watch Fox, you know.
Well, I think part of it is at least in Michigan, I think that there's a correlation that red counties are more into crystal meth than they are into weed. So I don't know, just anecdotal from what I see and where I grew up.
Where you grew up, right?
But where the challenges are coming, it seems as though in some cases they're being thwarted. Perry Johnson got slapped down by the Michigan Court of Appeals. It seems like Police Chief Craig similarly lost one of his challenges. There's another challenge which is going up to the Michigan Supreme Court, which doesn't seem as though that's going to be very fruitful. Monica Conyers is now switching over to the federal court and trying her luck over there. Not that she's running for governor on the Republican ticket in Michigan, but it seems as though the judicial system is pushing back on what are being considered frivolous lawsuits and frivolous challenges. Is that a sign of optimism?
Monica Conyers is taking a unique. I don't think the courts are going to buy it. I mean, her view is, first of all, the law was enacted after I committed my crime. How can it be retroactive to something that wasn't illegal then? But I don't know how much of an argument that's going to be. But I think the courts are so far doing the right thing. I think they're knocking down these cases with Craig and Perry Johnson and all these people.
Was it Alan? Was it after her plea agreement or after her conviction? Because it seems as though that would.
I think it was after her plea agreement, but before her sentence. It came, I think, maybe after her sentence. It was, the claim was the allegation is that it was aimed at Kwame Kilpatrick to make sure.
It was aimed at Kwame Kilpatrick, and the guy that introduced it had said it was aimed at Kwame Kilpatrick. But the big problem people have in the community is that you can be a convicted felon and run for the U.S. Senate and run for Congress, but you can't run for a state office. And so when you talk to folks out in the community, they say, well, Sam Riddle's running for Congress. Nobody said anything. Well, he can. He can run for Congress, but he can't run for city council.
Right.
So,
well, look at D.C. Marion Barry went to prison after smoking crack in an FBI sting, which I thought was really
which was ridiculous.
Was bullshit. I mean, here was a guy trying to get away. He was trying to go straight, and he has this hot woman that the FBI puts in, and she's like, "Come on, let's smoke." He's like, "No." She's like, "Come on." He's thinking like, "All right, I'll smoke some crack. I'll get laid." And then the FBI comes barging in and arrests him and sends him off to prison. But he came out, got elected as mayor, and then and city council and became mayor. Although at some point they took the control board there and basically took away every power except a head of the recreation department. And all his allies finally said, "I think it's time to go. You can't run for election again." So,
I want one of those T-shirts that was around DC at the time that said, "I saw the tape and the bitch did set him up."
Yeah.
Well, the other argument that Conyers' team is making is sort of splitting hairs by saying the law doesn't say she can't run; it says she can't be seated. So that's the other sort of hair splitting that they're doing in their argument. And yeah, I mean, it obviously laws vary from state to state, but I think more often than not, people have been, at least particularly in Southeast Michigan, much more forgiving when it comes to past transgressions. And I used to, as a reporter, say, okay, let's look at voting record, tax record, criminal record. And then now on the other side is kind of what I advise people. But I think now we have to add unpaid campaign finance fees.
Right.
That's
Listen,
a lot of people this go around.
Harold Washington, when he ran for mayor of Chicago, they attacked him, saying his lights were cut off, phone cut off, didn't pay his rent on time, etc. And people say, you know what? He's one of us. We know he's not
He's
stealing
not a
money.
daily. He's not
Yeah,
a daily.
right. They said he's living from paycheck to paycheck. That's how he got elected, because they thought they had him, saying, "Oh, this guy is a deadbeat. He don't pay his bills." And the folks that gravitated towards his campaign said, "Well, we have a hard time paying our bills too." So you're right. It
That's how
just depends on the person.
That's how J.D. Vance won the Ohio primaries. All those people saying, you know, he's lived what we live right
Yeah,
now.
going
even
to
though he went
Princeton or whatever. Didn't he go to
Yale,
Princeton?
yeah, he went to Yale. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's a novel defense on the part of Monica Conyers to claim collateral damage for a law that was supposed to be enacted for Kwame Kilpatrick. But you know,
Well,
things.
but you can't blame her for going to court. Listen, the way these courts are these days, you never know. You roll the dice.
You can roll the dice.
There's a racial component to her lawsuit as well, that she's saying that the white legislature, lawmakers around the state are making a determination who, she says that the law is basically aimed primarily, which is, you know, there are plenty of convicted guys out in Macomb, but she's saying that it's aimed primarily at Detroit, and that the Detroiters should make their decision whether they want to elect somebody, whether they've been convicted or not, and that the determination should
she has an argument, because there's been plenty of politicians in Detroit that's been white and been convicted, etc. But no one ever made a law saying that they can't run for 20 years until it happened to Kwame Kilpatrick. We have had other mayors in this city go to jail, indicted, took money, etc. So you can make that argument. Will it stand up in court? I'm not an attorney, so and people think, oh, well, why is she doing it? Well, you have to ask her.
There are interesting arguments in the suit. Whether the judge buys that is a whole other question.
But now, given the fact that some of the gubernatorial candidates have been unsuccessful in their challenges, I mean, it looks like things are pretty promising for incumbent Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Sizable margins over whomever is left in the field. The GOP miscues when it came to the petitions have definitely helped. Are things looking promising as far as the road for her reelection?
We have seen this before. She shouldn't take it for granted. I remember the polls when Blanchard ran against John England. The polls 20 points. He's up 20, 25. How large of a margin is the governor going to beat State Senator England? And when it was all over, we had a new governor. So,
well, and I also think when people are feeling less optimistic, less hopeful, that impacts the turnout, right? And so even though those numbers look good, will people still show up to the polls? Will people be as emboldened? The one positive, the standing ovation she got at Mackinac when she talked about reproductive rights. Mm-hmm. And I think that will help. I think it's already helped to energize at least part of the base. And so that will be helpful, but there's still going to have to be, I think, additional effort on the GOTV, because I think when you're facing all this sort of gloom and doom, you think everybody's, throw them all out, or, it's not going to make a difference. And so I think that's the one barrier she's going to have to overcome.
Yeah. Well, it's just too bad that abortions is not retroactive, because we wouldn't have any of these loonies up there, Trump and everybody else.
And of course, Darcy, Ryan Kelly was helpful enough to inform us that the Mackinac crowd is the radical left. So of course they would give her a standing O for talking about abortion.
Did he really say that?
Yes, he said. Well, he said he would not. He refused to appear at the debate for the remainder of the the 5 candidates who are still on the ballot. And he said it was because of the vaccine requirements. And they said, okay, you don't have to have it. We're going to move the whole thing outdoors. You don't have to have a vaccine. And then he still turned him down, and he said he referred to how the radical left has taken over the Mackinac.
I always looked at it from the other side. It was basically a right-wing get-together.
That's where the joke is, Adolf.
It's certainly super mainstream. There's not a more mainstream event than that.
Exactly.
You know, Adolf, your scientific research on retroactive abortion, it makes me think that you were working with Peachtree Dishes with Marjorie Taylor Greene as your lab partner there.
Well, she wouldn't be around if we had retroactive abortion.
There is a D student who has excelled in life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right.
Did she even make it through to get grades?
Al, there's still hope.
Oh, the Fenster humor coming through.
I didn't think that she made it through to even get grades recorded. But anyways, so we are at that part of the show now, Alan.
Schmuck I was. Schmuck. It's not smuck. It's schmuck. Smuck. Schmuck. Smuck. Say shh. Shh. Now say muck. Muck. Now say sh and muck together real fast. Smuck.
We are at the time for Schmuck of the Week. Darcy, we're going to begin with you.
So my Schmuck of the Week is Ronald Matt. He is the person behind the Michigan Leadership Group, which is still moving forward with a fundraiser. What's today? In a couple days, where they are going to give out an assault rifle, this very same one that was used to kill 19 kids and 2 teachers. So that's my Schmuck of the Week. Brownstown Township supporting GOP candidates at all levels of the ticket, called out by a sitting legislator and said, no, we're going to go forward with it. But of course, hopes and prayers.
Yeah. Horrified and heartbroken is the new thoughts and prayers. It was workshopped by Mitch McConnell in the last one and picked up by several others. It's heartbreaking and horrifying. So
interesting that the new buzz is a focus on mental illness after people going all the way back to Reagan and Engler gutted those kinds of programs.
Right.
And also the shooting in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The guy bought the gun 30 minutes before shooting 2 doctors and 2 other people. Wouldn't it then be good to have a background check to test for mental illness? Wonder where the anomalies are on that one. Adolf, who's your Schmuck of the Week?
Listen, Greg Abbott and his minions, who blamed one of the teachers at the elementary school for leaving the door unlocked, and that wasn't true. She saw the shooter. She ran in the building and closed the door. Guess what? The lock malfunctioned. It wasn't her fault. And now this woman is listen, probably on a suicide watch because but they threw her under the bus, ran her over 5 or 6 times, and then they had to backtrack. This Greg Abbott is. He's worse than garbage.
Yeah, he's pretty bad.
Okay, and by the way, Greg Abbott being the governor of Texas. Danny.
I didn't get a ton of time to think about this, but I guess no surprise. I think the 68th or 69th week running, I'll say Schmuck of the Week is Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, who is basically taking a free democratizing country and just vanished 10 years and completely vanished the futures of every young person in the country. And I think anytime I'm talking to American audiences, I should continue to bring it up. So that'll be my Schmuck of the Week.
Yeah, Myanmar.
And that is for Myanmar.
Right, yes. The Senior General of the Armed Forces of Myanmar.
Okay. All right. I didn't want anyone out there to think you were talking about Wyoming. That's a whole different show. Okay. Nancy.
Kevin Rinke, who was one of the 4 freakishly weird Republican gubernatorial candidates who debated yesterday at Mackinac. He said at some point during the question about Roe v. Wade that some states, not Michigan, but some states have introduced legislation to allow abortion up to 28 days after the birth of a live child. Nobody on the panel turned a hair. Neither of the two professional journalists said, boy, what are you talking about? And it just laid there like, as they say on The Wire, a bad pierogi on the plate. But that is the biggest hunk of steaming crap I've ever heard. But this is what you end up with when you have, when you have a candidates who live in their own right-wing news bubble. You know, when you read the Gateway Pundit, like it's the New York Times, this is what you come up with. So,
well, I think we were talking about that. You know, if you're going to allow abortion 28 days after the birth, then parents can go to their kids when they're 30 years old and say, I'm aborting you.
I was just going to say
I am rejecting you now. You are a disappointment.
The quickest comeback on that was when I mentioned it at dinner last night. It was a friend of mine who said, oh, catch and release.
A couple of years ago, there was a guy in India who sued his parents because he wished he'd never been born.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess that can happen. Alan, who's your schmuck of the week?
Mine is Kyle Rittenhouse, who has tweeted he was inspired by the Johnny Depp successful lawsuit and is now saying he is seriously considering suing all the people who refer to him as a murderer, including Whoopi Goldberg, who referred to him as a murderer even after his acquittal. He's also mentioned Cenk Uygur, whatever, of the Young Turks. He was charged with murder.
It's Cenk Uygur.
Oh,
Learn your Turkish, damn it.
I'm sorry. Sorry. Apologies. I did meet him once at a presidential debate. But I mean, it's just so absurd. And it's such, these lawyers are doing such a disservice. First of all, he's probably considered he's a public figure at this point. I mean, he's a celebrity, which already puts him in a whole different category. And the fact is, he was charged with murder. The fact is, he killed 2 people and he wounded a third. If any lawyer takes that, it is such a disservice to the First Amendment.
He has a team.
There will be a lawyer.
He has a team. He has a team.
Yeah.
He is a
one
puppy.
of the law. Yes.
It's a bunch of crock of shit.
He's a puppy yapping at the doorbell. I don't think that's going to happen. But.
Yeah,
well, I mean,
I'll tell you,
his legal defense fund. Well, his legal defense fund is massive from the last time.
Yeah, true. So
there are lawyers out there who are going to take it. I think.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, just a little bit of pushback. I think that at the time that it happened, he probably wasn't a public figure, and I think Oliver Wendell Holmes said that if you're thrusting yourself into the vortex of the public sphere, I'm not sure how much thrusting was involved, but I mean, but the point that you made that he did actually kill people, I think is probably the best defense. I think he's better off suing.
He's been on talk shows. He's promoted himself now.
Yeah.
He's become a public figure. And these comments were with Whoopi Goldberg was after his acquittal. There's just no basis on a First Amendment. There's no basis in law that would allow a successful lawsuit. Like we saw Sarah Palin trying to sue the New York Times. I mean,
which went down.
Which went down, even before the verdict came. The judge had just said,
right,
whatever happens.
I think he might be better off suing Amber Heard right now in the current climate. But that's just. There's a pylon going on there. Okay, well, my schmuck of the week is the 25-year-old Ohio woman who was gored by a bison at Yellowstone National Park when she approached it within 10 feet, even though being admonished, don't get within 25 feet of an animal which averages the males somewhere between 1,100 to 2,200 pounds, and the females between 750 to about 1,100 pounds. Her name has not been released. She was gored but was not killed. I think to protect her identity, and also just in case you're keeping track, the name of the
Great timing.
the name of the bison hasn't been released either, to protect its own anonymity. So for being monumentally stupid with one of the largest land animals in the United States, anonymous Ohio woman, you're my schmuck of the week.
She's from Grove City. She's which is a suburb of Columbus. It's not known for producing like big thinkers. So there you go.
Well, all I know is that how many people in Grove City are going to be walking around with a scar from being gored by a bison? I think
Actually,
that we're not.
when was the last time you checked on that? Because I heard conflicting reports that she had died. But
I did too.
And I followed up and saw those had been refuted as being
so
erroneous.
she is still alive. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Bikini season is permanently over for her. Then she's not going to want to show that one. So.
Yes, the shame exists. So there you go. Well, listen, thank you again for a wonderful discussion of a wide range of topics. Danny Fenster, Adolph Mongo, Darcy McConnell, Nancy Derringer, all thank you. And thank you to you, Alan Lingle. And you get the final word.
And drive home safely.
Thanks, everybody. And driving home safely is going to cost you more money out there because it's over $5 a gallon. Anyway, take care.